Hello, this is Benjamin Full Forward speaking. Since today is Thanksgiving in the United States, it's a good moment to reflect on what we are expressing gratitude for. My ancestors came on the Mayflower, leaving Europe in search of freedom, freedom to determine their future and practice their beliefs. They survived thanks to the help of the original inhabitants, the native people. Later, my family moved to Canada together with the same native tribe that had once supported them. We have lived together in peace and mutual prosperity ever since, and we never broke the agreements made with them. Unfortunately, those who arrived later gradually began placing the people of the United States under a new form of enslavement. I recently received evidence supporting what I've long claimed, that the United States now operates under a Babylonian-style debt slavery system. A video illustrates how human beings are essentially used as collateral for money created out of thin air. The U.S. government has a UCC filing on everyone. When I asked for proof, someone told me to visit a certain website, search a specific number, and watch what appears. After following the steps, documents linked to the Federal Reserve and the Department of Defense appeared. As I continued investigating, more information came up: fees, filing details, certified copies, and a full UCCC financial statement. The documents list the Treasury as the secured party and include broad claims involving all real men with hands and legs and all real property in the United States. The numbers listed are enormous. To me, this confirms that a form of bondage exists, and action is required to end it. More people are coming to realize what's going on, and many now believe that Israel and wealthy oligarchs are at the core of the issue. Nick Fuentes has described how AIPAC operates, working through billionaires who distribute money created from nothing, and it is known that Donald Trump received assistance from the Rothschilds. The entire structure of control ultimately points in that direction. Forensic leads connect this network to Jean-Michel the Rothschild, whom some claim is known publicly as Brigitte Macron, according to French intelligence. This individual was involved in the alleged killing of Donald Trump. We also need to discuss Donald Trump himself. He became an avatar used by various factions in pursuit of a long-term plan for the future. At different times, different groups operated through this Trump figure. The positive version of Trump, supported by the Harriman Group, was the taller 6'3" individual who reappeared in the 2024 election. His agenda focused on government efficiency, preventing national bankruptcy, and draining the swamp. But he vanished in June after attending the G7 summit in Canada and never returned. After his disappearance, the shorter, heavier Trump, whose behavior drastically differed, began appearing on screens, escalating conflicts with Iran, pushing toward a global war, and aligning himself tightly with Israel. This is the version currently active. The person identified as Jean-Michel the Rothschild, along with individuals such as Alexander Bonella, Patrick Strazada, and Bernard Emily, are alleged to be behind operations targeting public figures like Marjorie Taylor Greene, Candace Owens, and General Douglas Macgregor. These actors must be removed from positions where they can influence events if we want liberation from the debt slavery system. The economic structure sustaining this system is also deteriorating. It can no longer sustain itself. A clear example is the introduction of 50-year mortgages. Under such terms, homeowners pay mostly interest for the first 25 years and spend half a century paying off a property, ultimately spending around $1.4 million on a house valued at $400,000. This mechanism drains wealth from ordinary people, placing home ownership beyond reach for many. Another illustration is a BlackRock-related video explaining how they buy up homes in bulk, not to live in, but to reduce available supply, influence mortgage rates, and raise rents. With limited housing available, they can charge almost anything. Their strategy keeps home prices artificially high, ensuring that people remain trapped in lifelong debt. In reality, the cost of materials and labor should make homes far cheaper, perhaps around $10,000, but the system deliberately prevents that. As this system collapses, its operators have tried to create large-scale conflicts to maintain control. People, however, are waking up. The Epstein Island revelations are now widely known. Evidence and testimony show that many Western leaders were compromised. Disturbing materials involving figures like Barack Obama have surfaced. These individuals are extremely worried as they understand that they may face war crimes tribunals. According to my contacts within Polish intelligence, Vladimir Zelensky and his senior officials have already escaped to Israel, and they will not be able to hide there. They will be pursued even in Israel. They created a fake mercenary outfit called Wagner, made it appear Russian, and then rounded up Ukrainian men and transported them to a designated location. Meanwhile, a party preparing to take power in Germany is openly acknowledging the situation and offering truth and reconciliation terms if the current leadership steps aside. It's difficult to accept, but the West desperately needs functional governments again, otherwise we risk ending up under Chinese domination. A proper transition must be arranged. Last week I proposed to MI6 that the blackmailed and compromised Keir Starmer be removed and replaced with Nigel Farage as Prime Minister. Farage could then convene a major conference. Behind the scenes, discussions have already brought agreement among the Russians, Chinese, Indians, and the P3 Freemasons, who hold influence over the Vatican, the Commonwealth, and the Pentagon. They concur that the existing Babylonian debt slavery structure must be dismantled and replaced with a forward-planning organization that works transparently on behalf of the people. This is essentially the model China uses. They consult their population, determine what they want, and assign capable individuals to make it happen. In contrast, the West is dominated by a tiny elite focused solely on extracting wealth. They've accumulated fortunes they cannot even spend, while the general population has been impoverished. The current system must be taken apart. The goal is to convene a conference similar to Bretton Woods to negotiate the bankruptcy of the United States and the broader Western Bloc. These nations are insolvent, and China has agreed to forgive the debt, but on the condition that the West ends its role as global aggressor and cooperates within a multipolar framework to improve the planet. That is the mission. That is the only viable option. Otherwise, chaos and street violence will be the outcome. Another video illustrates the network backing the fake Trump. Recall that the Space Force had its own version of Trump, the 6-foot-tall one aligned with the white hats. But now the darker Trump, tied to a satanic faction, is the one being shown publicly. Their time is running out. This cannot continue. Humanity must be liberated from this plague, and it will happen. The critical step is apprehending Jean-Michel de Rothschild. He must be arrested and interrogated. The evidence trail points directly to him as the primary figure. It is time to end this nightmare. Virtually everyone agrees, except those benefiting from it. That concludes my comments for this week. Now I'd like to respond to questions from viewers. Question: how can we accept arrests carried out by police or military when the judiciary is corrupt? Officers I've spoken to avoid politics and refuse to get involved. Also, Cash, Bino, and Pam Bondi recently had a dispute, and Bino wanted to resign. Dan seems honorable. Do you have updates? Answer: generally, the top 1 to 3 individuals are compromised, which creates a ceiling for everyone beneath them. In such a broken system, the only solution is military tribunals. The corruption is too widespread for civilian institutions to repair it. Military justice is direct and decisive, and that is where this is heading. Question: world leaders use doubles, but how can Trump be completely replaced? Where was the Secret Service? Where is the military? Why didn't they intervene? And why is Trump's family silent? Answer: they aren't speaking, but the underlying issue is that a dark faction within the military follows the orders of the so-called Satanists. Most soldiers are conditioned to obey, and when orders come from corrupt leaders, the result is a corrupt military. The solution is replacing the top brass. I have repeatedly recommended General Douglas MacGregor to begin this cleanup. Rank and file personnel must push upward, and any general unable to explain their wealth must be removed. They've been paid off. This problem is especially acute in the Army, though the Navy, Air Force, and Marines are comparatively cleaner. High-level arrests will be necessary. Progress will not occur until then. Question. You previously said secret societies were prepared to act against the cabal and were tired of waiting for the U.S. white hats. Now you seem to be waiting on the U.S. military instead. Have the societies changed their plans? Answer. My counsel to the Asian secret societies was always the same. Avoid giving the cabal any justification to trigger a global war. I told them time would favor them because their economic system is superior. They are now so strong that fighting is unnecessary. For instance, China can produce aircraft at 200 times the American rate, and the U.S. cannot manufacture modern weapons without Chinese rare earth minerals. Even attempting to rebuild that supply chain would require a decade and massive investment. They are following Sun Tzu's principle of winning without fighting. When Trump visited Xi Jinping, apparently not the short, overweight imposter we see now, but someone wearing a mask, he begged for money and was refused. The U.S. government ultimately secured some silver from drug cartels to cover expenses until January. The collapse may occur without major conflict or widespread assassinations. Roughly 85% of the world is already free from the cabal. Only the G7 nations, the remaining 15%, are still under its control. Earlier today, I appeared on air with conservative radio host Jeff Kuhner on WRKO in Boston, Massachusetts. We talked about the 6 congressmen who recently advised troops not to follow unlawful commands. I told Kuhner that the congressmen technically did nothing wrong. Legally, they were correct in saying soldiers should not obey illegal orders. Of course, both he and I know they were subtly implying resistance to Trump. I asked whether any of them explicitly told the military to defy Trump's directives. The answer was no. I added that the 5'10" Trump currently in the White House will take no action because he is the imposter aligned with the Rothschilds and Chabad. Kuhner started laughing, so I asked him, how tall is the real Trump? He replied 6'3" or 6'4". I said, exactly, but that Trump hasn't been seen since the G7 meeting in Canada back in June. Kuhner continued making jokes. I reminded him, as I've mentioned before, speak with investigative journalist Benjamin Fulford. He previously told me he'd never heard of you, as if that somehow proved anything. For the record, the White House does listen to Kuhner's show because I've passed along key information through it. He has a significant radio and online audience. So I'm asking Ben, could you call his program between 6 and 10 a.m. Eastern, Monday through Friday, and surprise him with what you know? What would you want to tell him? Based on what I've heard, he seems to be controlled opposition and likely wouldn't take my call, but if you email me the number, I can try. The reality is that much of the so-called alternative media is also under the influence of these same groups. The test is simple. Listen to what they say about Israel. Whether they address the 450,000 missing children during the Biden administration or the mass killings in Ukraine. If they avoid these topics, they're controlled. Talking to them won't achieve anything because they're working for the cabal. Still, I'll give it a try. Next question, our final one for today. You've said several times that AI won't replace jobs or isn't as capable as some claim. My concern is that the AI narrative fits disturbingly well with the Soros, Gates, BlackRock, Rockefeller, WEF agenda of you will own nothing and be happy. If AI ever did become truly advanced, it could push us toward that future faster. I don't want to live under a system where we are forced into Bill Gates' synthetic food economy. How do we stop that path? It feels like AI is an economic turning point where the wealthy no longer need human workers. They could rely on AI to maintain power while everyone else loses all economic mobility. What's your take? In the West, the main safeguard against AI-enabled control is preventing the introduction of mandatory digital currency. If everyone is forced into a digital-only system, they can track every move we make. Say something they dislike, and suddenly your car won't start, or you're blocked from buying groceries. That's the slavery system they're trying to impose. The best defense is to keep using cash. Personally, I use cash when I don't want anyone tracking a purchase, and I use cards only when I don't care. For instance, I'll use a card for groceries, but pay cash for alcohol because I don't want anyone monitoring how much I'm drinking. Things like that. Avoid full digital dependence. As for AI itself, the real danger emerges only when it controls the physical world. AI alone can't build anything. It has no capacity to manufacture. But China is now producing AI-driven humanoid robots, and they're claiming that within 2 or 3 years, these robots will be indistinguishable from humans. If an AI gains control over these robots, it could begin producing weapons, and that is the real threat. This is why discussions with China about their robotics program are essential before matters escalate. Overall, I'm fairly confident that China is currently aligned with the White Hats. They've been purging cabal elements, especially those associated with the men in white suits. So I believe reaching an agreement with China is possible. The lies, the deception, the carefully crafted narratives from the Marxist left will continue for as long as people allow themselves to believe them. But the truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way to rise to the surface. And when the light of awareness shines into the shadows they have tried so desperately to hide, people will finally see how they were led, guided, and manipulated by stories that sounded reasonable, moral, even righteous, but were in reality nothing more than tools of control. They use fear as a weapon. They twist information until it becomes unrecognizable, shaping it into whatever form serves their agenda. They create an atmosphere where doubt is treated as disloyalty, where questions are condemned as rebellion. They promise a future of equality and justice while disguising the slow decay of freedom happening right in front of us, where independent thought is shamed and free speech is pushed into a corner. But people cannot stay blind forever. Eventually, individuals begin to question what they hear, to examine the world around them more carefully, and when they do, they start to notice the cracks. They ask themselves, why are those who claim to defend justice the ones most terrified of the truth? Why do those who preach freedom work so hard to monitor, censor, and regulate what others are allowed to say or think? That moment, the moment when people begin to open their eyes, is the very thing the manipulators fear most. Because once the truth begins to surface, every propaganda campaign, every fabricated narrative, every polished promise begins to crumble. Their power, once held so tightly, stops being a shield and becomes evidence of what they truly are. Truth does not need violence to defend itself. It only needs to be seen, and once it is seen, no force can stop it. But awakening is only the beginning. Once people recognize the deception, they are faced with a choice: return to the comfortable illusion or step forward into the uncertainty of truth. Many will hesitate. The illusion, after all, is familiar. It asks nothing of them except obedience. It rewards complacency with a sense of belonging. It tells them they are good as long as they repeat the approved ideas and stay within the boundaries drawn for them. Truth, however, demands courage. It forces people to confront uncomfortable realities about the world, about their leaders, and sometimes about themselves. It reveals how easily entire societies can be guided into submission, not by force, but by narratives, by manipulation, by the slow and steady erosion of independent thought. Those in power know this well. That is why they fight so fiercely to maintain control over information. They fear a population that thinks for itself, because such a population becomes impossible to govern through deception. When people begin to question authority, the entire system of illusion starts to fracture. You can already see the pressure building. People who once stayed silent now speak out. People who once trusted blindly now investigate for themselves. People who once followed orders unquestioningly now demand accountability. And every voice that rises inspires another. Every question encourages 10 more. Every truth that escapes their control becomes a crack in the dam they built around society. The architects of the deception sense this shift. They respond with desperation, tightening censorship, doubling down on propaganda, labeling dissent as extremism. They insist that obedience is safety, that silence is virtue, that conformity is peace. But their grip weakens each day because a society that has tasted truth cannot be forced back into darkness. A new awareness is spreading, slowly at first, then suddenly, like a flame catching dry grass. What comes next depends on the courage of those who refuse to be deceived any longer. It depends on the willingness of individuals to stand firm in the face of intimidation, to defend their right to speak, to question, to disagree. Because the future is not controlled by those who manipulate the narrative. It belongs to those who dare to confront it. And as more people awaken, a quiet but undeniable shift begins to spread through society. First as whispers, then as conversations, then as a collective realization no amount of censorship can contain. People start to recognize that they were never powerless. They were only made to feel powerless. They see that the true strength of any system comes not from its institutions or its elites, but from the millions of individuals who choose every day whether to comply or to stand firm. The manipulators sense this loss of control. Their response becomes frantic. They create new crises, new distractions, new enemies, anything to pull attention away from the growing awareness they cannot stop. They insist the world is on the brink of chaos, hoping fear will drive people back into submission. They weaponize division, turning neighbor against neighbor, hoping the public will be too busy fighting each other to see who is really pulling the strings. But something has changed. People are no longer so easily fooled. They begin to recognize the patterns, how every emergency conveniently demands more control, how every solution quietly reduces freedom, how every promised safeguard becomes another chain. They see how institutions that once claimed moral authority now hide behind secrecy and surveillance. The illusion is collapsing, and once an illusion collapses, everything built on top of it becomes unstable. Policies that once seemed unquestionable suddenly look suspicious. Figures once treated as infallible now appear ordinary and deeply flawed. Narratives once accepted without hesitation now crumble under even the simplest scrutiny. This awakening does not happen all at once. It spreads in waves, some slow, some sudden, but each one pushes society closer to a tipping point. A moment where enough people understand the truth that the old system can no longer sustain itself. The ones in power feel this moment approaching. You can see it in their tone, more urgent, more authoritarian, more desperate. You can see it in their actions, more surveillance, more censorship, more attempts to silence dissent. But none of it can stop what is coming. Because once the public realizes that truth is not granted by authority but discovered through courage, the balance of power shifts forever. The people begin to reclaim not just their voices, but their agency, their autonomy, their right to question every narrative, especially the ones they are told never to question. A new chapter is forming on the horizon, one that cannot be written by the deceivers, no matter how hard they fight. The next move belongs to those who have finally opened their eyes. I have ancestors on the Mayflower, and they fled Europe because they wanted freedom. They wanted to have the ability to choose their own future and their own system of beliefs. And they were saved by the original inhabitants, the natives there. And later, my ancestors moved to Canada along with the original native tribe that helped us back then. And we still live together in peace and prosperity, and we never broke our promise to them. However, the people who came afterwards slowly started to enslave the people of the United States. And I've just was sent some proof of what I've always been saying, which is that the United States is now under a system of Babylonian debt slavery. Take a look at this video showing exactly how we are collateral for this money that they're creating out of nothing. Basically, we are the slaves they're using to create money.
The United States government got a UCC filed on everyone. So I said, prove it. He said, go to maryland.org.ucc. Scroll down. Do a number search. Put in this number right here. Okay, y'all, follow me. I was following them. Because I wanted to see the outcome. So I was patient. Then when I was done, all of a sudden, it was like everything popped right up. Look at that. The Federal Reserve System. United States Department of Defense Accounting Services. So I decided to scroll down some more, get a good overlook, check things out. Then I went deeper. Y'all know me. I like to do a little bit of that investigation. Hit the button. And look what popped up. Oh yeah, all of the fees and how much they paid. How much they paid to file their filing for your body. Hey, it was $198 though for the whole complete process. And that was for them. Hell yeah, certified. They wanted a certified copy. And here's their UCC financial statement. Y'all see who is the debtor? Debtor 2. Debtor. Who's the secure party? The United States Treasury. And look at the bottom. Don't forget every check mark box. You want to know everything. Over here, let me go to the addendum, the UCC3. And look what else they filed. Look what they claimed in here. Look who's the debtor in here. Look who's the debtor in here.
Department of Defense.
And look how much. And look at what they claimed. All real men with hands and legs. And all real land in the United States of America. And look at that number. Wow.
That is proof that we are under a system of slavery, and we need to do something about it. And this is something that is happening in a way that we're starting to understand. And a lot of people now, I think the majority understand that it's Israel is the problem. And it's these billionaire oligarchs who are the problem. For example, take a look at this Nick Fuentes explaining how IPAC really does its job. It goes via billionaires using money created out of nothing. And put it out to the public, because otherwise I would not be doing my job. And we know that Donald Trump was bailed out by the Rothschilds, and the power structure, this control grid that we are under, it leads to the Rothschild family. And in fact, the forensic evidence goes to Jean-Michel de Rothschild, known to us as Brigitte Macron. And French intelligence called me and said that this Macron was responsible for the murder of Donald Trump. Now, we need to talk a little bit about Donald Trump, because he is basically an avatar for a long-term plot that they've had for us, for our future. And there are different factions using the Donald Trump avatar. And the good Donald Trump was backed by the Harriman Group. And by the way, the actual Donald Trump, and you can tell his face changed, everything changed between before 89 and after 89.
And the Trump who was elected in 2024 again was the 6'3" tall good guy avatar Trump, and he was, he set up this Department of Government Efficiency and was trying very hard to rescue the United States from bankruptcy and drain the swamp. And he disappeared in June. He went to the G7 summit in Canada and he never returned. So after that, suddenly we have this short, fat, ugly Trump, the one that we're still seeing on our screens, suddenly declaring war on Iran and trying to start World War III and, sucking up to Israel. And, it became a nightmare scenario. And this is the Trump that we need to deal with. And again, the person who was Jean-Michel de Rothschild. And I have some names of the, this is actionable intelligence. We need to go after Jean-Michel, and we need to go after Alexander Benalla, Patrick Strazada, Bernard Emily. Okay? And these are the people who are ordering the hits on people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Candace Owens and General Douglas McGregor. And they need to be eliminated from the system. This is what we have to do if we're going to free ourselves from this Babylonian debt slavery system we're under. And the other thing that we need to understand is that the system is now falling apart. It cannot maintain itself anymore. For example, they're now trying to put out 50-year mortgages, which means if you look at a 50-year mortgage, here's how it works. For the first 25 years, you only pay interest, basically. And it takes 50 years to finally pay off the house, and you end up paying $1.4 million for a house that was worth $400,000. This is how they extract money from us, and it's got to the point where we can no longer afford houses. And now take a look at this little BlackRock video.
We don't buy these houses to live in. We buy them in bulk, shrinking the number of homes on the open market, skewing mortgage rates, and exacerbating the housing crisis. Then, thanks to low supply, we charge whatever we want for rent. It's all part of our company motto. Fuck you!
These people really do artificially keep the price of houses high enough so that we have to basically work for a whole lifetime to pay for a house. So, houses should only cost about $10,000 if you think about the materials and the labor and stuff. But no, they want us to be in a system of lifetime debt slavery. And they realize that their system is falling apart, which is why they've been desperately trying to start war. And we're waking up. Most people now are aware of the Epstein Islands and the fact that we are ruled by a group of people. And if you want to become a leader in the West, this has now been proven. There's countless testimony. I've posted some very disturbing photographs of people like Barack Obama. These people are really, really criminal, and they're really, really scared right now because they know that they're going to face war crimes tribunals. My own sources in Polish intelligence tell me that Vladimir Zelensky and his top government officials have already fled to Israel, and they will not find shelter there. We're going to go after them in Israel. They set up a fake mercenary company called Wagner, and they pretended it was Russian, and they grabbed all these Ukrainian men, sent them to a specific place. Here we have a group that's about to take power in Germany, admitting that, and they're saying we'll offer you truth and reconciliation in exchange for stepping aside. I know that's a hard pill to swallow, but we really do need to get good governments in the West again, or we're all going to be working for the Chinese. And that means we have to set up a transition. Now, what I have proposed to MI6 last week is that we remove the blackmailed pedophile Keir Starmer and put Nigel Farage in as prime minister. He can then call for a conference, and negotiations behind the scenes have already resulted in, we have an agreement. The Russians, the Chinese, the Indians, the P3 Freemasons who control the Vatican, the Commonwealth, the Pentagon, they all agree that we need to replace the system of Babylonian debt slavery with a future planning agency that works for the people in complete transparency, trying to create the future they want. This is basically the system China has. They survey their people, find out what they want, and then they try to give it to them using intelligent people. Whereas in the West, we have a very tiny class that's all they're trying to do is figure out ways to rip us off. And they've accumulated so much money they can't spend it, and the rest of us are all poor. And this system needs to be dismantled. And so the idea is to call a conference, sort of like the Bretton Woods, to negotiate the bankruptcy of the United States and the collective West, because they are bankrupt. And the Chinese have agreed to write off all this debt. But, the condition, of course, is that we stop being the world's terrorists and instead work together for a multipolar world to make this a better planet. That's what we're fighting for. That's what we've got to do. And there's no alternative. Well, the alternative is going to be street violence. And here's one more video showing, the kind of network behind the fake Trump. Remember, the Space Force had their own Trump, the 6-foot-tall one, and he was working with the White Hats. But now we have this dark Trump, putting our faces together with this whole satanic cult. They're not going to be around much longer, I promise it. We cannot let this continue. We need to free humanity from this scourge, and it will happen. And the key is to get Jean-Michel de Rothschild. Arrest him. Make him talk. He's the head of the snake. This is what the evidence trail leads to. So it's time. We need to end this horror show. I think everybody except them agrees with this now. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself this week. Now I'd like to answer questions from readers and viewers.
Hi, Ben. We have our first question for today. How can we accept any arrest by a member of police or military if the judges are corrupt also? Any police officer I've spoken to in the past would just smile and say to stay away from politics, and that they also want to stay away from politics. Also, Cash, Bogino, and Pam Bondi had a fallout recently. Bogino wanted to leave his position. I think Dan is a man of integrity. Do you have any news about what happened there and then? I believe that they're currently all compromised.
Well, what happens is the top 1, 2, 3 people are compromised, and then the people below that run into a glass ceiling. And I think the answer is going to have to be military tribunals. The system is so corrupt, it's beyond repair. We're going to have to, the military is going to have to set up tribunals, and military justice is swift. That's what's going to be the answer. Next question.
Hi, Ben. World leaders use body doubles, okay, but how can you explain Trump being completely replaced? Where was the Secret Service? Where's the U.S. military, and why haven't they intervened? It would also seem the perfect opportunity for the military to act. Where is the Trump family in all of this, and why are they not saying anything?
Well, they're not saying anything, but yeah, the problem is there is a dark hack military working for the Satanists, and most military, unfortunately, are completely conditioned to obey orders. And the problem is when the orders are coming from evil people, the military becomes evil. So the trick is to have the top ranks of the military replaced. I repeatedly suggested that we use General Douglas MacGregor to clean up the military and start the process. But it's going to have to be the rank and file pushing up, and you're going to have to remove any general who has money that can't explain how they got it because they've been bribed and compromised. And this is especially true. I think the the Navy and the Marines and the Air Force are relatively clean, but it's the Army itself that has a lot of the corruption at the top. So that's going to have to be dealt with. But yeah, we're all impatient, and you know, some people are going to have to be arrested at the top. Otherwise, this is not going to move forward until things collapse. Next question.
Hi, Ben. You seem to have backed off your assurance that the secret societies would intervene against the cabal and that they were sick and tired of waiting for the U.S. white hats to take any action. Now you seem to be waiting for the U.S. military to step up. Have the secret societies changed their mind, and now are they at the point where they won't move until the U.S. military does?
Well, my advice was always to the Asian secret societies is to not give these people any excuse to start World War III. I also explained to them that time was on their side because they have a superior system of economic management, and now they're so overwhelmingly strong that they don't need to fight. For example, China can make 200 times more airplanes than the United States. And the U.S. cannot build weapons without Chinese rare earths. And even if they wanted to start making their own rare earths, it would take about a decade and super investment to do that. So they're following the advice of that great military genius Sun Tzu, which is to win without fighting. And when Trump went to meet Xi Jinping, and this apparently was not the short, fat, fake Trump we're seeing, but some guy in a mask. He begged for money, and they said no. Eventually, the U.S. government managed to get some silver from the drug cartels to pay their bills until January, but it looks like this is going to end without fighting and without the need for lots of assassinations. Because already 85% of the world is free from this cabal. It's just the G7, the Western 15% that's still under control of these. Next question.
Hi, Ben. I was on the air this morning with a conservative talk show host, Jeff Cooner, at the WRKO in Boston, Massachusetts. We discussed the 6 congressmen telling the troops not to obey illegal orders. I told Cooner the congressmen did nothing wrong. Technically, they were right on saying I did not follow illegal orders, although I know, like you do, they were hinting at disobeying Trump. I asked if anywhere did they say to disobey Trump's orders. The answer was no. I went on to say nothing will be done by the 5'10 Trump in the White House, since that is the fake Trump who works for the Rothschilds and Chabad. Cooner started laughing. So I asked him how tall is the real Trump. He said 6'3" or 6'4". I said correct, but that Trump hasn't been seen since June at the G7 summit in Canada. Cooner made some more jokes about it. I said, like I've told you before, talk to investigative reporter Benjamin Fulford. Again, as Cooner said to me on an earlier call that he had never heard of you, as if that's supposed to be credible. By the way, the White House does listen to Cooner's show by me dropping the pearl of the height problem, since Cooner has a very large radio internet audience. Therefore, I ask you, Ben, if you would give Cooner a call between the hours of 6 and 10 a.m. Eastern Standard, Monday through Friday, and surprise Cooner with your information. What do you think you would be able to tell him?
Well, from what I heard, it sounds like he is actually a controlled opposition, and he probably wouldn't take my call. But if you email me the number, I'll try to do that and see. But basically, a lot of the even so-called alternative media is under control of these people, and the test is to see what they say about Israel and what they say about do they talk about the 450,000 children who disappeared during the Biden administration? Do they talk about the genocide in Ukraine? If not, then they're just controlled, and talking to them is not going to make any difference because they're working for the cabal. But I'll try to do that. Next question.
Hi, Ben. We have our last question for today. You've suggested several times that AI won't replace jobs, or that it isn't capable, as some people claim. My concern is that the narratives around AI aligns uncomfortably well with the broader Soros Gates, BlackRock, Rockefeller / WEF vision of you will own nothing and be happy. If AI ever became genuinely capable, it would accelerate that outcome significantly. I have no interest in ending up in a system where we're forced into Bill Gates' synthetic food agenda. How do we prevent this trajectory? My worry is that AI marks an economic tipping point where the wealthy no longer rely on human labor. They could leverage AI to maintain their dominance while the rest of society loses even the possibility of upward mobility. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, in the West, the key to preventing AI control is to make sure we don't get digital currency, because if we all are forced to use digital currency, then they'll be monitoring us 24 hours a day, and if we say something they don't like, suddenly our car won't start, or we won't be able to go to buy groceries. So they're trying to set up a system of complete slavery, and the way to avoid that is to try to use cash. Personally, I use cash when I don't want someone to know what I'm doing or buying, and when I don't care. So, for example, I'll use a card for groceries, but maybe I'll use cash to buy alcohol because I don't want them to know how much I'm drinking, stuff like that. But try to avoid that. The other thing, and this is the real danger, right now AI is not a threat because it does not control the physical world. It cannot make anything, and so it's not real. However, China is now building AI-powered robots, and they're saying that within 2 or 3 years that we won't be able to tell the difference between a robot and a human being. And if we have an AI that takes over control of the robots, then they could start making weapons, and that's the real danger. And so we need to talk to China about those robots before it's too late. But overall, I'm pretty sure that China is now under the control of the white hats, and they have been purging a lot of the cabal, who were there, who were behind that, men in white suits. So I think we'll be able to make a deal with China, and we'll make sure that. But it's time to fight. We really are at a turning point now, and I'm doing everything I can to try to end this nightmare, and I want everyone else who's listening to try to do the same. Okay, well, that's what I have to say for myself today, and I hope to see you again next week.